President Zelensky of Ukraine is in Saudi Arabia today ahead of the high-level talks between Ukrainian and American officials about a ceasefire in the conflict with Russia. Zelensky has said his country has been striving for peace since the start of the war. And in further signs of the poor state of Russia-UK relations, we learned this morning that Moscow has accused two British diplomats of spying and given them 2 weeks to leave the country. Dr. Jenny Mathers is a senior lecturer in international relations at Aberystwyth University, specialising on Russia, and she joins me now. Jenny, hello, good afternoon.
Hello.
So we know Zelensky is in Jeddah, although he won't actually take part in the talks between Ukraine and America. They're hoping to agree a framework ceasefire deal. What might that look like, do you think?
Well, what Zelensky has suggested is a sort of a staged arrangement where first there's a halt in, for example, at sea and on the land and see how that goes. And then, if that holds, then move on to sort of, a full ceasefire, and then be in a position to start talking about what a peace might look like. Because I think one of Zelensky's key concerns, and the concerns of most Ukrainians, is that Russia will not adhere to any terms of a ceasefire, and in fact will break a ceasefire almost immediately. So before he signs on the dotted line for any kind of a peace deal, especially one that might involve signing away Ukrainian territory, he wants to be confident to some extent that Russia will actually keep its word.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've sort of seen a lot over the last week of the extent to which Ukraine might give, the extent to which it's prepared to sort of back down on what the ideal Ukrainian position would be, all in the face of generally pressure from the United States and more than pressure. But have we seen any sign whatsoever that Moscow is prepared to give anything, to row back on its demands, which basically add up to total capitulation? Has there been any sign of that at all?
No, there hasn't been. Russia has simply reiterated its demands in various different forms, everything from, keeping all of the territory, not only that it holds in Ukraine, but that it claims. It doesn't even occupy all the territory, but it claims to have annexed, insisting that, Ukraine should be neutral, should not ever join NATO, that its armed forces should be reduced, Zelensky should be replaced, there should be new elections. Oh, and by the way, NATO membership, which expanded anytime after the end of the Cold War, should all be rolled back and U.S. troops should be withdrawn. So, Russia has a very long wish list for these negotiations and shows absolutely no sign of being willing to make any concessions.
I mean, I suppose one could argue that when Russia launched the latest invasion of Ukraine, the plan there was complete destruction of the Ukrainian state and a puppet government in Kyiv. And that, at least, one would think is no longer on the table, right?
Well, it may not be on the table at this precise moment, but there is a very strong suspicion that this is Russia's ultimate aim, and that it would be furthered by a peace deal which would effectively make Ukraine a neutral power with a very small army and a regime in Kyiv which would not be Zelensky, which would, in Russia's eyes, or ideally in Russia's eyes, be a puppet that Moscow could control.
Yeah, sure. I mean, and the vetoes that Russia wants, that we believe Russia wants against Ukraine ever joining NATO or the EU. Do you think, is there at this stage any chance that any time soon Ukraine joins either NATO or the EU? Is one of those more likely than the other, perhaps?
Well, the EU has already made Ukraine a candidate member. And, so Ukraine is working its way through the various lengthy, complicated procedures that are in front of it to become a full member. Indeed, the EU has kind of hinted that they might be willing to speed up the process for Ukraine. So I think that's a much more likely prospect in the medium term. NATO membership at the moment is not something that most NATO members are willing to offer to Ukraine, and certainly something that Donald Trump has said, should never happen.
Yeah, sure. Well, the Kremlin said this morning that Russia is at an initial stage of restoring bilateral relations with the US. That it's very strange to have that kind of direct, those kind of direct negotiations between Russia and the US that even now, with everything that's going on in Saudi Arabia, leave out Ukraine. And one gets the sense that both Washington and Moscow are thinking about their relationship with each other being far more important than Ukraine at all, right?
Absolutely. I mean, for Donald Trump, Ukraine is an awkward stumbling block on the way of improving relations with Russia. And of course, Putin's ideal has always been not to sit down and have negotiations with Ukraine as an equal, because Russia doesn't regard Ukraine as an equal. Instead, Moscow has always pushed for negotiations over a peace deal to happen directly with the United States, which it regards as, the other great power in the world, which it has a right to sit down with and make big decisions. So this is very much, on Putin's playbook, on his agenda that Trump is very much going along with.
And look, finally, the expulsion we've seen of British diplomats by Moscow, which has just happened, should we see that as a response generally to British support for Ukraine, or is this the usual tit for tat?
Well, I mean, timings of these things are always interesting, and I think Moscow is very sensitive to its ability to send signals in this way. So I don't think it's a coincidence that this should be happening now when Britain has taken a very strong stand in favor of Ukraine. When Keir Starmer embraced Zelensky in public and arranged for him to meet the king, all of these things are definitely black marks against Britain as far as Russia is concerned. And so, yes, I think even if they were already planning to expel these two diplomats, I'm sure the timing is affected by what's happening in the bigger Ukrainian context.
Dr. Jenny Mathers of Aberystwyth University, thank you very much indeed.
Good morning.
I want to thank all our European leaders, first of all, and for such strong support. This constant strong support from the very beginning of the war, and what's been during all this period and last week. You stay with us, and of course from all the Ukrainians, from all our nations. It's great that we are not alone. We feel it. And we know it. Thank you so much for everything, and signals to increase our production, and signals to, with the new program, to increase the European security. That's, I think, the great decisions.
Europe plan. The ReArm Europe plan provides up to 800 billion euros for defense investment. It gives the member states fiscal space to invest in defense. It gives the member states possibility to invest in the Ukrainian defense industry or to procure military capabilities that go right away to Ukraine. So it is to the benefit of rearming Europe, rearming the European Union, but also arming Ukraine in its existential fight for its sovereignty and territorial integrity.
Of course, the security and defense of Europe is not separated of Ukraine security and defense. A stronger European defense, it boosts Ukrainian defense, and a stronger capacity for Ukraine defense is also very important to boost our own defense.